Sonny from The View has suggested that Biden should pardon his son.
It is the right thing to do.
Mark Zuckerberg had dinner with Donald Trump. Elon Musk wants to buy Hasbro. Joe Rogan shared his secret to all of his success.
It's real simple.
This is actually just a couple days after the Australian press was questioning how he's managed to reach such a malevolent and dangerous level of success.
Quite malevolent.
And speaking of Australia, we're going to take a look at the new social media ban there as well.
Wondering, should Biden pardon his son, Hunter?
Jared Kushner had a powerful connected father-in-law, right? Because one of the people that Donald Trump pardoned in his first term was Charlie Kushner, Jared Kushner's father, who pleaded guilty to 16 counts of tax evasion, 1 count of retaliating against a federal witness, and another count of lying to the Federal Election Commission. So I would say if people didn't have an issue with Trump pardoning his son-in-law's father, I don't think they should have an issue with Joe Biden pardoning his son.
But I do think a lot of the country might have issues with both.
Trump is going to be handing out pardons like cheeseburgers as soon as he gets into office.
And he has said he's going to pardon January 6th insurrectionists. One of the issues that I have is when you look at the charges that Hunter Biden was indicted on, less than 0.09% of the population is are indicted on that charge. And so it's basically close to zero. So I actually think that the only reason he was indicted is because his last name is Biden. So if you look at it like that, right? If you look at it like that, then it is the right thing to do to correct course and correct that wrong and pardon his son.
I look at a lot of comment sections and conversations between Democrats and videos, things like that, to get different points of views. One thing I see very frequently recently is this idea that you can justify doing wrong and acting immorally by pointing at someone else who has done wrong. I'd love to know what you think of this way of thinking. To me, it seems like this will only lead towards a degradation of society if everybody just thinks that way. I mean, we were all taught as kids that 2 wrongs don't make a right, but in a way this is worse because it's like just allowing yourself to act any way you want as long as you can find somebody else. Now, obviously, it's unlikely that Biden will do it because it would be very, very hypocritical. You see one of the other hosts actually saying that here.
I worry a little bit about the implications for the country, and I mean this not because Hunter Biden affects the country, but because there's such a distrust in the powerful, the politically connected. And there's this idea that there's a different system of justice. We just saw Donald Trump, his indictments go away because he's in power. I feel like this would add to that. And then think of the fact that you've got a lot of people who are wrongly incarcerated right now, or they're incarcerated on minor charges who don't have a connected, powerful father. So I have very mixed feelings on it.
Then Mark Zuckerberg has met with Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago, and they had dinner.
And Mark Zuckerberg has been very clear about his desire to be a supporter of and a participant in this change that we're seeing all around America, all around the world with this reform movement that Donald Trump is leading. Mark Zuckerberg, like so many business leaders, understand that President Trump is an agent of change, an agent of prosperity. Right. And Mark, obviously, he has his own interests and he has his own company and he has his own agenda, but he's made clear that he wants to support the national renewal of America under President Trump's leadership.
And this is quite the turnaround because obviously they've had their disagreements over the years. In 2020, obviously Mark Zuckerberg squashed information being spread on Facebook about the Hunter Biden laptop situation.
The FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant.
And then in 2021, he banned Trump from Facebook and Instagram. He then later ended up apologizing to Trump for interfering with the 2020 election.
and in retrospect, we shouldn't have demoted the story. Zuckerberg went on to say the company has changed its policies and processes to make sure it doesn't happen again.
And he claimed that the government had pressured him into doing it. So it seems like he'd begun to kind of self-reflect on all of the stuff that had gone on and come to look at it in a new light. Then during this election campaign, when Trump got shot and raised his fist in the air, Mark Zuckerberg came out and said that that was one of the most badass things he's ever seen in his life. So, you know, he had really kind of done a 180 and changed his tune. So now they've met. No one knows what they actually talked about. What do you think Mark Zuckerberg's aim is in doing this? Recently, the government has been putting more regulations on big tech, and so Meta's seen the effects of that. Do you think that could be his incentive, or do you think he's trying to right some of the things that he feels he did wrong in the past? Now recently Elon Musk has been talking about buying MSNBC, and we saw a lot of kind of scared reactions from the media.
You are the media. My message to Elon Musk is bullshit.
The latest is that Elon has actually joked about buying Hasbro because the owner of Dungeons and Dragons has insisted that he's going to continue down the kind of woke pathway with D&D, and that he doesn't really care about what the older D&D users like Elon Musk want. And in response, Elon has joked about buying Hasbro. Now, of course, we all know that his jokes sometimes turn into reality, as the case was with Twitter turning into X. So we'll see what happens. How do you feel about Elon Musk potentially buying up all of these different companies? Is it going a bit too far? Does he have too much influence? Or do you think he'll be able to do some good with it? Joe Rogan was attacked by the Australian press a couple of days ago, where they were basically trying to figure out how he's become so influential and so successful, but they just tore him to shreds in their kind of opinion of him.
Prey on people's vulnerabilities. They
calling
prey on
him
fear.
malevolent, and he takes advantage of vulnerable people and all sorts of very insulting insinuations. Coincidentally, in his latest podcast, he got chatting with his guest about how he became so successful, and here's what he had to say.
It's just having conversations with people. I like talking to people. It's fun.
Yeah, but I
enjoy it.
Good.
I'm a curious person, and I like talking to people. But it's real simple.
Yeah, but it's just because it's simple, right? You make it sound like a parenthetical. Oh, it's just a conversation.
Yeah.
That's only just the hardest thing there is to do.
But it's not really. It's not.
Then why don't more people do it?
Because they don't enjoy it. They don't enjoy it like I enjoy it. Like, some people genuinely don't like talking to people. You know why? Because they're interested in themselves. You have to be interested in other people. I think we're all connected. I really firmly believe this in a non-hippie way. I think it's like a scientific reality. I mean, I think if we could figure out a way to study it, we would recognize that we're psychically all connected in some strange way. And I am curious as to how someone with a different biology, different life experiences, different geographic location in which they were raised, like, how are they navigating the world, and why are they interested in opera? Like, why? What is it? Why? What got you to be a beekeeper? Why are you so fascinated with painting? What made you start writing music? Like, I'm interested.
Yeah.
I like talking to people. So for me, it is easy. You and I could have the same exact conversation if we were having dinner somewhere.
For sure.
I have to say, I'd love that Australian guy who talked badly about him to see that, because, you know, I think it says so much more about that man's mindset if he views people and the world in such a dark, negative way, such a cynical way, when really, I mean, People who listen to Joe Rogan know exactly why he's popular. It's exactly that. It's just that he's just curious and likes to learn and ask questions and likes to just chat. What do you think? Is that the key to his success? Now, Australia has just banned social media for children under the age of 16. So this man, Andrew, who's a lecturer in the University of Oxford, he came on and gave his opinion on the ban.
How does the Australian government expect to be able to enforce this legislation? And what are they expecting of these social media companies? And how are they going to police this?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think anyone knows the answer to that question. There really isn't a particularly clear plan here about how you would enforce something like age targets on users. We know that the technology to estimate ages is fundamentally flawed. And I don't think anybody wants to be uploading their passports or their personal information or their driving licenses to hop on Instagram.
We know that there are huge problems around the use of social media and kids under the age of 18. Let's just talk about what some of those issues are and why it is that Australia has made this move.
Yeah, so I mean, there are some pretty concrete things, dangers of the internet and dangers of social media. These are things that are very boring. Some of these things are like distracted driving. Thousands of people are killed every year in the United States and in the EU and in Australia from distracted driving using social media, literally in front of their faces. And obviously these websites are used for people who want to sexually exploit young people and groom them. And there's some pretty dark communities in terms of things like self-harm and eating disorders. But nothing in this ban actually helps young people or empowers families to kind of tackle those kind of really tough online harms. This is much more of a feel-good measure to like kind of try to put this back on platforms. But really there's no way for it to be effective.
What are some of the other ways that other governments around the world are trying to tackle this? We know that there is a lot of harm to teenagers from social media. We also know, and I mean, many teenagers will agree that they wish they had no access to social media, but they do, of course. Others will say that there's a lot of good that comes from social media. How are other governments trying to cope?
Well, so other countries have tried actually, versions of what the Australians are about to embark on. South Korea actually turned the internet off for all under 18s for more than a decade. And they found that none of the technology actually worked. When it did work, there was no savings to well-being, no improvements to sleep, no changes to well-being or school marks. And ultimately, it was shown to be unconstitutional. I'm much more optimistic about places like here in the UK, where we're actually listening to young people. We're listening to researchers like myself in terms of making online environments safer, as opposed to just kind of sticking our head in the sand and just pretending like this social media thing is just going to go away.
What are you suggesting as an improvement here? I mean, and should this even be in the sort of public sphere? I mean, obviously governments are there to help protect us, but how much onus should be on social media companies themselves?
Yeah, so I think there needs to be a huge burden needs to be placed on social media firms. First of all, they need to be able to share. They need to be forced to share the data that they have on young people, not with advertisers, but with researchers, so that we can actually unpick the harms and the benefits of these online platforms. Second, I think it's crazy that the tax money that these firms pay, when they pay it goes to filling potholes, and kind of, social, different services. It should go to actually understanding and supporting young people, finding them where they are. And then absolutely, we need ethical design codes. We need to be able to hold tech companies to account when they do, when young people do fall through the cracks. Setting a ban at 16, what it does is it actually absolves tech platforms of responsibility. If something bad happens on a platform, they're going to say, and a young person say uses a VPN or they sneak onto a platform somehow, they're going to say, well, it's not our fault. We put in the best technologies that exist, and they don't need to actually make their platforms safer or better.
Elon Musk posted on X about this very legislation in Australia, saying, seems like a backdoor way to control access to the internet, by all Australians. Is this fear by social media leaders something that could happen?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, a broken clock is right twice a day. But no, I mean, I think that there are real human rights implications for this, you know, depending on how it's implemented. Australia is a signatory to the UN Charter of the Rights of the Child. And, you know, we young people have a right to information. Like upwards of 60% of young people in Australia get their news from social media. Children have a right to play, and young people play through these online platforms. Elon's right here. And if you read the statements by Meta, you know, and Snap, they're pretty clear that actually nothing in this legislation is going to make a single kid safer.
I personally actually disagree with him, and this may be controversial, but I actually don't think a ban of social media for children is a bad idea. So I can tell by that man's age that he will have grown up in a time when there was no social media. He'll have gone through his childhood and teenage years without it. And that's the same as me. Social media wasn't really introduced until I was in my mid-teens, and it wasn't half as kind of crazy as it is now. And knowing what life was like before social media, I have to say that it was a whole lot less complicated. I was a lot more present. There was a lot more opportunity to connect with friends, just spending time together outside at our different homes. There was just a lot more opportunity to socialize in person, and there was a lot less distraction, a lot less just overload and bombardment of information, and a lot less negative influence, you know, from all these people online who you can end up comparing yourself to or being negatively influenced by. Personally, I don't find that social media added anything particularly positive to my life. And when I say social media, I mean in particular things like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I've actually come to see social media like junk food, and I understand that this could be seen as imposing on people's rights, but we have different rights for children, and it's very common. Things like adults can smoke cigarettes, children can't because it's bad for you. Adults can drink alcohol, children can't. There's the fact that it's bad for you, and there's also the addictiveness aspect. And social media, it's actually been designed to be as addictive as possible. It makes me feel a bit more secure to think that if I have kids one day, that they could grow up in a world where they're not bombarded with social media influences and all the negativity that brings. I am certain that other people will have a different take on this, because I understand that it does impose on people's rights to a certain degree. So I'm really, really curious to hear other people's take on it. So please share your opinion. And do you think that this is a good idea? And do you think that other countries will follow Australia's lead on this, or will this just kind of be a fail? Thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed, please subscribe to my channel. I really, really appreciate it. And please share your opinion. As I always say, it's just so important to do that. Thanks, bye.